Welcome everyone to another episode of Product Pain to Gain. Really excited today to have Simon and Patrick with me. Both founded QuantusFlow about 10 years ago, and they're helping software teams to deliver their software, to improve their work, but also they are thinking quite heavily about how to do that on a bigger scale, how to identify the challenges that we have or the bottlenecks in those teams, and maybe how you can automate that work and that improvement work that we all are striving to do. So, hi Patrick, hi Simon.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Awesome. Yeah, so we will split the episode in two parts, basically. First, I really would like to learn from you what you learned with the different teams that you come in when you're consulting or when you're working as an external company in those development teams, and what you see, what are the bottlenecks, what are the challenges those teams have. And then the second aspect of today's episode is talking about how we can improve, how we can make it better. So let's start with the first topic. Really interested in what you see working out there in terms of frameworks, in terms of productivity and whatnot.
Yeah, I think the most it's the biggest problem I've seen in most of the teams is that there's a missing common understanding of the product or of the business vision. So I think that's quite important that every member in the team really knows not only what to do, but also why we do it. So especially in big enterprises, in very large projects, sometimes the single developer or single team member is pretty lost about the really big vision of the project, the goals, which has to be reached. And that's basically a problem. So if you try to solve some kind of business problem, then you also have to understand the business itself. Yeah, it's not only a technical problem, so put a button here and there, especially if you develop some kind of UX, you really need to understand the underlying business as well and the mission of the project. That's one thing. And the other thing is that because it's easier, teams are wrongly focusing first on raising efficiency, not effectiveness. So they're trying to optimize some processes and some work, like the DevOps chain, but the thinking, if it's really effective, what they're doing, if it's accounting for the business value which has to be reached, that's really a problem. That's first, it's really a focus on efficiency, but not primary on the effectiveness. That's also a problem. What I've seen several times.
So putting that a bit into perspective, so for my end, you would consider the burn down chart basically the sign or the KPI that is mostly used for efficiency, right? Or how much weight does a single developer lift through the iteration? How would you measure the effectiveness? How would you kind of say this is what effective looks like?
Yeah, that's also a good question. So basically, if you imagine walking towards a specific destination, you can optimize your efficiency by walking faster or something like that, and measuring how many steps you can do per minute. To really measure effectiveness, you will need something like a compass. You know that you are walking in the right direction. That's the point here. So if you want to measure effectiveness, you have to measure your direction. So if you really reach more business value, if you are closer to your goals, to your targets of your project, and it's pretty hard to measure, and that's why it's not done so often. But that's really important that you really compare your way and your progress to your final goals.
All right, so if we think about moving into the right direction and understanding the direction, the first I would like to talk a little bit more about the vision and the business objectives, basically, which is in essence the direction we want to achieve a business outcome. What are your indicators? What do you see out there? What happens if a development team, if a delivery team, if a product team is not aligned on vision, if they do not understand the direction they need to go?
Yeah, that's pretty easy. So if they don't really respect or work with some KPIs like business value, and it's not very much discussed, what's the impact of every single feature or every single ticket you work on a specific business value, then it's a clear sign that you don't have any clues what you are doing. So it could be that you implement some gamification or some neat user stuff like styling and so on, that you can have a really stylish UI and all that stuff. But for this case of this line of business applications, which is mostly done in big enterprises, so they're used. These apps are used internally, so you don't have very much requirements for big styling stuff and so on. But if you really concentrate on these topics, you can't generate really a big value in terms of cost savings or maybe more making more money. So that's pretty much useless.
If I can also add some another perspective, what I also see what actually works good, because now Patrick was mentioning like things which are not working so smoothly. So there are the issues and they have to focus more on those goals, let's say. What I see which really works good is the whole agile development which has happened the last years, that we actually currently have really, really good teams, and we have very like high educated teams which are really able to really solve problems. But that's exactly what Patrick says. You can walk fast, but if you do not have the direction, then the walking fast does not mean anything, right? So I think there's no better time right now for developing software, because you have a very, very good tooling. You have AI is not around the corner; it's here. It really helps you out, and I think this whole setup is there. And if we tune a bit using the compass to really focus into the right direction, I think this is the next, I think the next adjustment in Agile. To actually manage the factors which are coming outside on the team, like priorities, like where do we go, what is important, and that stuff. And this need to be adjusted. And there is a lot of product management and higher management, which is which needs to be adapted here, because teams are very good at the moment, I would say. Like in all the teams I have worked with in the last years, they're like very, very skilled, and they can I don't know, they can easily solve things. But sometimes maybe it's not the important thing what they're working on. But if they would, I think you really can move big stones.
Mm-hmm. So basically, looking back at the 10 years of experience with Quantusflow, and I know both of you have much more experience before founding Quantusflow. You talked about things improving. What has improved? Like what is it that teams are now doing better than maybe 10 years ago?
I think this interdisciplinary approach, first of all, the Agile manifesto, this one big point that you put people over processes, this really works out, because if you do not have a functional team, like even personal, social wise, you really need to talk to people. You need to be open about problems. Don't be scared about talking about issues and all that stuff. Like the team spirit, which has been evolved in the past years, is I think this is the right direction, and this is thanks to the Agile movement, I would say. And if you read today the Agile manifesto, I think most people would say, yeah, makes sense. So it really is a good thing. But yeah, to be agile, I think, or also to really implement agile, and you have to think all the process end to end. So everybody needs to, like in the problem domain, everybody who is involved in solving problem needs to be part of the team, right? So it's not good to have those borders. There's a sales team, business unit, which just want to increase sales. That's what they want. Then they give it into some team and hope everything works. I think we need to include them. We need to create big teams, and everybody needs to be a bit, having the agile spirits. This, I think, like the way we develop today, and I would say really has been better than 10 years ago, because it's more open. Yeah, the retrospective, for example, to have the ability to adjust things and to question processes. I think this is already been adopted by the management, so they are open for that. But still, there's still issues, right? For the right priority, how to find the most important, and how to, in the end, really focus on the most important, together with the team, with the strength of the team, to really accomplish it, right? To not jump around like this is important and that is important. So, this is probably Agile. Like people think maybe this is Agile, but it's not meant to be, right? That the focus is jumping all the time. But in case of risks, then you need to be Agile, then you need to be like a little flexible and you need to move. But if you know your priorities, I think it's very, very good for a team to focus and to accomplish the goals and also unleash the potential, what you have planned in the very beginning, in the first place.
Let's talk about that for a second. First of all, summarizing, and I think that's a very good takeaway also for today and for the audience, is Agile teams have become much better. We have now a oftentimes very productive team, a very active team, but still like the processes around those teams and especially the alignment on what you want to achieve, the compass, I love the analogy, by the way. I think that's really cool. That's something to work on. And I think from my experience, working on the product management side, that's the homework, right? You can't, there's no framework or like a process that cuts off the homework for you talking to people, aligning, making sure that everybody is on the same page of what we want to achieve, what the business problem is we want to solve, basically, or what the customer challenges we want to solve, right? So I think that's a very good takeaway. Now, talking about agility, there's an interesting topic that you just kind of touched on, which is what does agility even mean? And of course, we have switching priorities, right? Of course, sometimes there's a much more important project that we need to bring in quickly, or there's a certain bug fix, or there's a vulnerability. So there's a couple of things that sometimes happen, or oftentimes happen from my experience. How can the teams handle that? How do you see out there? How is that affecting agility, or where's agility needed, maybe?
I think the first, maybe let's not talk about mistakes here, but I think one mistake is that you try to solve it by having strong teams. So you have one team for front end, one team for back end, one team for sales, and then you try to interconnect them. I think it's better to be agile within the problem domain, So you build like workforces around an issue you have, and that's like, let's say right now the most important. And currently in that sprint or whatever, like in the next time, we're going to work on this and we focus on that. And you only gather people which can work on that problem domain. And the problem domain can touch a lot of stuff, right? If you want to increase sales, for example, you have to go to marketing, you have to talk to salespeople, maybe to the front end because you develop some new web shop thing, new feature, of course, the back end to get the data and everything. So just for an example. So you get all the people together. Then you make this workforce team, and within there, it's good to be agile. You have your dailies, you have your things, you see what can we maybe within that problem domain switch priorities, what to do first and what to the next. But the main goal still stays and is not changed much, and that's important for the teams as well, or for the workforces, that be agile within your problem domain and not jump, okay, today sales is important. The next day is important that everybody knows everything, so make documentation. And then the next day is something else, it's more important. And then you switch like the whole, let's say, epics around. And this is important that agility can only happen on the problem domain.
Yeah, that's a good point. Basically, that's done wrong in many cases. That Agile is implemented maybe only in a specific sub-team. Only the developers are working quite of Agile. And to really become Agile in your, like Simon said, problem domain, you have to implement it end to end in all the sub-teams, not only the developers, but also the product owners, the designers, testers, DevOps people, and so on. They're all working together. And it doesn't work if you don't implement Agile methods end to end. So from the very first beginning, where a specific requirement starts, to the deployment of a feature, which comes out after the whole chain of work we have here. And yeah, that's also some kind of management problem, because most companies still use classical management approaches, and they try to micromanage the specific teams, which doesn't correspond to the approach, which is also like some kind of agile approach of self-organized teams. And that means that self-organized, that you don't only choose your own pencils or the color of your desk, or if you're using a Windows or a Mac. So self-organization means more to control also the communication to the interfaces to other departments and to people in your company, to really have the best way to solve your own problems. And especially in big enterprises, this is controlled by some upper management, and this is not good. So you really have to think agile in a whole for the whole company.
Which oftentimes is a challenge if you are part of a group, basically, right? Or if you're part of a smaller team. But I think still you can basically adjust the processes and go that extra mile maybe to collect the data, to understand a bit better and improve, right? So of course we won't like to have agile in the enterprise, but I know from larger enterprises, from my peers working in those larger enterprises, it oftentimes depends on the business unit you're working in or how a certain manager is approaching the problem. But still, I think some learnings from today, what you just said, even if you are not in control of the overall big process, raising those concerns or raising those ideas is really something that can help to improve. And the cool thing about this is like even a little bit more insights into the product vision and understanding the business value behind it is already helping. So it's not like we have a 100%, 0% and like binary success thing here. It's more like you can already do a little bit of improvement. All right. So before we jump into like the conclusions, I would like to learn a little bit about how to improve and how to make this situation a bit better understanding kind of what a team is missing and how to adjust. And I know of both of you, we talked about the ideas you have around optimizing the workflows and understanding better. Tell us a bit more about your ideas there.
Yeah, basically what we're doing is to simply approach to some kind of theory, more or less also beside Agile, or maybe it's some kind of like foundation also for the Agile movement. One method or one theory is this theory of constraints we're using a lot as a base for our work. And let me say one or two sentences what we're talking about, what it is, a theory of constraints. So we assume that every system has a constraint. So imagine a group of hitchhikers, a classic example of this kind of theory. And these group of hitchhikers, they want to reach a destination in a given time together. Yeah. So, and as you can imagine, the whole group will never be faster than the slowest member in this group. To raise the speed, someone maybe has to carry the bag of the slowest one. Slow member can walk faster. And after this, you maybe have some other things you can do to improve the overall velocity of this group. Yeah, and this is how the theory of constraints approaches the management of complex systems. You can see that you always have a flow, maybe of work, maybe of energy, or everything you can imagine. And this theory says that there are certain bottlenecks in every system you have. Yeah, but you don't concentrate on the bottlenecks. You concentrate on the one and only constraint. And the one and only constraint in the system is the one which controls the throughput in the system, so the speed of the output. And sometimes it's pretty hard to really identify the constraint in the system. And that's our point. We are trying to support the teams, the management, to identify the constraint in the specific projects, because product teams are also such open systems. So the requirements or work items, they are coming in and produced results are getting out. So that's a typical complex system where we can apply the theory of constraints. That's what we try to do.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, I guess it's quite easy from a theoretical perspective, right? So saying, okay, we need to identify the constraints, but looking at the actual world out there, sometimes you have a guess, sometimes talking to a couple of people on the team, brings you up kind of a constraint, but you don't know exactly, is that the thing that holds us down basically, or that makes us slower, or is that just perceived as the right? Do they look at the cause or the symptom sometimes? And I mean, as a human being, you oftentimes do that. Yeah, you see a certain symptom and you identify this is the problem, but it may be not the problem. It might be just a symptom of a bigger problem. It becomes also even more complicated if you jump into a role of someone who needs to improve across multiple teams, because then you don't have the chance to talk to every single individual or like spend the time in those teams oftentimes. What would you suggest in that situation? How would you encounter that problem?
I would say that.
Yeah, sorry. It gets even more complicated. So you think of product development as a dynamic process. So the system itself is changing always. Yeah, you have more or less different requirements. Maybe the team setup changes during the time of the project, and that makes it even more complicated to really identify the constraint. But basically, you can concentrate on some specific KPIs in your workflow to make it much easier to concentrate on bottlenecks or on the specific constraint. So first of all, what we have to do to achieve our results is to really look end to end on the complete workflow. So what we're seeing in a lot of teams, especially in the big ones, which are combined by several teams, as I said before, so you have a product team, a designer team, one or more development teams, like front and back and so on, testers. Single sub-team is working with their own boards. They have specific tools and they hand over specific work items. And if you try to really have a look at the complete workflow, it's pretty hard in many enterprises because they don't work like this. How can I say it? It's pretty much splattered over all the team members. And that's quite a big problem because then you can't really calculate with some KPIs like the whole throughput in the system and see what's the throughput in the sub-teams and so on, to really say, okay, at this point, maybe in testing, there's my bottleneck, not only my bottleneck, but there's a constraint. So the output isn't faster than the testers can test maybe some things. You can see it pretty easy if you really inspect the right KPI.
Yeah, and to also elaborate on that, you need time for that. And that's, I think, also, which is very important nowadays, that exactly for that, to sit down and identify the KPIs, which may result in new priorities. We just measure that let's say our website is too slow. And it is like it takes 10 seconds. So you have a measurement. And then this is like right now, I think, one of the most important things we need to work on, because that causes, even if you just quickly think about it, of course, a sales decrease, right? So you have a measurement. From that measurement, you go, or you have data, and from there you go to your goals, to your let's say epics, and the work you need to push into the team. And of course, when you measure something, then you could identify quite easily like a constraint, right? If you put like but what is your goal? So it should be 1 second or whatever. So you have your compare data, and then you can, with a bit of time within a team, you can easily see that this is right now the constraint for sales. And then you have it, let's say. Then you have, maybe this is your most priority even. So even if you look at this perspective, once you have those KPIs, you even solve maybe the prioritizing problem some people have. Because if you really have the rule, you need to measure something to also prove later when it's done that it really is like unleashing the potential of, being increased. Like now the website is really faster. Then you have like the full end-to-end process of something you want to have until the end. I solved it. Once you measure, and that's I think one important step within those teams that you need to measure. This takes time, and maybe that I jump now to a next topic. Maybe that you have to make sure that your team is a bit of underload to be able to do that. I mean, to check data. Maybe data changes. Maybe next time the speed of the website is even slower than before. So you're a little bit in this flexible and agile measurement system, which gives you all the time data. Then you need to react on it. But to do this, you need to have time and resources. And I think that is also one important thing. I mean, coming to the hitchhikers, if they identify there's the slowest person, and then that's because of the slowest person in the back that we are not walking fast enough, they need time. They need to stop. They need to see what can we do. Do I take his backpack? Are his shoes maybe the cause? So you really need to investigate, and you have the room. You need to have the room for finding out what is this. And this is uncertain. Sometimes you really don't know what are the causes. You just measure things and you don't know why. And I think for that, the argument of underloading teams is a very big argument, because then you really can be agile and we are able to switch within your problem domain a bit of the priorities, but you still solve the outer problem of being slow.
So basically reserving a percentage of the capacity for self-improvement, so that the rest of the percentage, the rest of the capacity basically is becoming better and becoming more valuable every iteration or every
Exactly.
cycle.
And also, of course, it feels in the very first place, it feels strange for somebody who is human resources, or like having all the budget, and checking all the resources, and sees, yeah, but why do we let the people work only 70% of their work or 80% of their work? First, you would say, yeah, I don't know, it doesn't make sense, right? But you need to, if you want agile, you need to also consider this this percentage of creating room for it. And also, it should not be mixed up with the buffer you put when you estimate maybe something. If I have a problem I need to solve, like I need to develop some API and I need to estimate, like how long does it take? Of course, I have some buffer in there, but this is a local buffer. This is the buffer for the problem itself, for the small little thing I solved, the API. But the outer, like the environment and everything, also needs a certain buffer. And I think this needs to be on top of all the estimations, which have the local buffers already included. On top, you need to give the team room, and they also need to know it, that they can help. They can help out, they can think about it, and they should also think about things, how to solve things, and really find a good solution instead of hurry, our burn down chart, we're not making it, and then getting crazy about it, but they need to have the room for making also quality work.
Let me give another example for this to really understand the basics of capacity. There are some underlying laws also in the work of complex systems, more or less like physics. If you think about a traffic jam, so of a highway and putting more and more cars on it, so you really can imagine that if you really put 100% of cars on a highway, this will definitely lead to a traffic jam. So the throughput is really going to leading to zero sometimes. You really need to underload the highway to really have the possibility to transport as much as cars as possible over the highway. And that's more or less the same like with our work, but we don't see it so clearly because our work items aren't really physically present. You can't really see them, but it's the same underlying mathematics.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's a very, very positive and also very good concept to keep in mind when planning the teams, when planning the workload, and understanding a little bit how to achieve the best outcome overall, not just the highest effectiveness. As we are coming to an end with this episode, is there one last thing you would like to share, and maybe your ideas around how to solve that in the future?
Yeah, I think what we need to focus on in the future, like having a new tool set maybe at hand, is something that we need to make sure that we focus more on the identifying of the constraints, like make them visible. Very often they're somehow there and you work on them, but they're not clearly identified by somebody. So the why we work on things is of course driven by some constraint, but they're not connected yet. So I think it's good to focus on identifying constraints, make them visible, create a common understanding in the team. That is the bottleneck here, and that's a very important task we need to work on right now. And of course, if you go one level higher, or like that is let's say the second level of it is that you make this constraint, if you know the constraint or the constraints, even if you have more in the system or more bottlenecks, that they're going to move. And you need to see, when I solve that issue, then of course, maybe we then afterwards have an issue here. And you can already, like, even if you focus more on the constraints, you can see the connection. So if I increase my testers, maybe the next problem I will have is that I have 2 less developers now giving the testers their work or whatever. So you just move it. And if you then make the constraint manageable, so you're able to increase testers and you are able to decrease developers maybe, then you are really managing it. And that's the goal of all of it, that you're able to control it. So first identify and then control. If you cannot control anymore, then maybe the constraint is outside of your system. There's no budget for new testers. So company needs money, and then maybe it's not in your product domain anymore. So, you move the constraint out of your system. That's the main goal. Because then within your system, you're good. I have a good system here, but I have outer environmental circumstances which are limiting.
Yeah, and one other aspect is that you will get better foresights of what you're doing. So imagine if you miss some deadlines for some features and so on. So at which point it makes sense to have new developers? Is it really a solution to a current problem? Or when does this affect the work in your team? So having better foresights and to see when a constraint will impact your work and the throughput of your system. That's also an important point.
Okay, I think that's a very interesting topic that we could dive even deeper into. But the whole tool, and I think that's the takeaway of the second part of the episode, the whole tool about thinking about constraints and being able to manage the constraints and identifying not only for the sake of understanding, but identifying to change something or to make clearly visible and get to a decision is, I think, such a powerful tool that is way too little used out there and intentionally brought up. Thank you so much, Simon. Thank you so much, Patrick, for the really cool episode that we had together. I think it won't be the last time we see you, I guess. And wish you a very cool week and have a great time.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. You too.